He was sitting across from his mistress at a candlelit restaurant, laughing, ordering wine, completely convinced that his pregnant wife was home, folding baby clothes and waiting for him like she always did. He had no idea she was not waiting at all. She was building a case. See, here is what Nathan Calloway did not know about his wife Celeste. Before he convinced her to quit her career and stay home, she was a forensic accountant. The kind of woman who traced hidden money for a living. The kind of woman who could follow a dollar through 4 shell companies and find it sitting in an offshore account before lunch. And for 6 months, while he smiled with his mistress every Tuesday and Thursday night, Celeste was documenting every hotel charge, every calendar lie, every photograph, every cent. He thought he was untouchable. He was wrong. And what happened when those divorce papers landed on his desk while she was 8 months pregnant with his daughter is a story you will not forget. Stay with me. This one hits different. Value statement and lesson. Before we begin, here is what this story is really about. It is not just about betrayal. It is not just about revenge. It is about the moment a woman remembers who she was before someone convinced her to become less. It is about the difference between a life built on someone else's approval and a life built on your own terms. If you have ever felt invisible in your own home, if you have ever shrunk yourself to make someone else comfortable, if you have ever wondered whether starting over is even possible, this story is for you, because the answer is yes, and how you start over matters more than why you had to. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something, do me a small favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. Drop a comment below and tell me, what moment hit you the hardest? Was it the envelope on his desk? Was it the pharmacy scene? Was it the school gate at the end? I read every single comment, and your words keep this channel alive. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story tonight, share it with them. Sometimes the right story at the right time can change everything. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening all the way through. That means more than you know.
A woman's hands trembled as she slid a cream-colored envelope across a polished conference table. Her wedding ring caught the overhead light, throwing a brief spark across the dark wood surface. On the other side of the table, a man in a charcoal suit picked up the envelope with the slow precision of someone who already understood that certain moments cannot be reversed once entered. He broke the seal. He read the first line. And every constructed truth he had built across 14 months collapsed in the time it took his eyes to move from left to right across a single sentence. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let me tell you how we got here. Because 6 months before that envelope landed on that table, the woman who sent it was standing in a nursery she had painted herself during her second trimester, believing with her whole heart that the life she had built was real. And the man who received it was sitting in a hotel room with another woman, believing with equal certainty that he could hold both worlds in his hands forever without either one slipping through his fingers. They were both wrong, but only one of them was about to find out just how wrong, and it would not be the one you might expect. 6 months earlier, on a Tuesday morning in October, Nathan Calloway stood at the bathroom mirror of his 6-bedroom colonial home in Westport, Connecticut, and adjusted his tie with the calm satisfaction of a man who believed the day had already been arranged in his favor. He was 45 years old, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who had long ago stopped needing anyone to confirm his own importance. The firm he had founded 17 years ago, Calloway and Associates, had grown into one of the most respected architectural practices in the tri-state area. His name appeared on glass facades in downtown Manhattan, on award plaques in lobby corridors, and occasionally in the business section of the regional newspaper, beside a photograph where he always remembered to look comfortable rather than proud. The bedroom behind him was still and warm. His wife Celeste lay in the bed, with both hands resting on her rounded belly, her breathing soft and even. She was 8 months pregnant, and she was beautiful in a way Nathan noticed sometimes. The way you notice familiar furniture, with acknowledgement but without real attention. He had loved her once, with something that felt urgent and consuming, back when she was a sharp-eyed forensic accountant who could trace a hidden asset through 4 shell companies before lunch. That was 9 years ago. Somewhere between then and now, the urgency had faded into something Nathan mistook for contentment, but was actually the slow erosion of respect. He walked to her side of the bed and pressed a kiss to her forehead. She stirred and looked up at him with clear, dark eyes. "Drive safely," she said. "Do not wait up," he told her. He picked up his leather briefcase from the hallway chair and walked out into the October morning feeling as though the world was arranged precisely as it should be. Celeste waited until she heard his car pull out of the driveway. Then she opened her eyes fully, rolled carefully onto her side, and reached for the small notebook on her nightstand. She added a single line to a list that had been growing quietly for 6 months. Then she closed the notebook, placed it in the locked drawer of her bedside table, and began her morning with the methodical calm of a woman who had stopped crying 3 months ago and started planning instead. Nathan arrived at his Manhattan office by 9. The building was glass and steel, 42 stories of architectural ambition that bore his name on the lobby directory in polished brass letters. He spent an hour reviewing drawings for a new commercial development in Midtown before sending his assistant a brief message. The message said he would be unavailable from 6 that evening until approximately 9, and that all calls should go to voicemail. His assistant, a young man named Tobias Grant, who had worked for Nathan for 3 years, confirmed without comment. He had been confirming these same Tuesday and Thursday evening blocks for over a year. He confirmed them the way you confirm weather forecasts, with professional acknowledgement and private resignation that the pattern would continue regardless of what anyone thought about it. What Nathan did during those hours was not complicated, but it was comprehensive. Brooke Kensington was 29, sharp-witted, and had come into Nathan's life when her event coordination company handled the opening celebration for one of his completed projects 14 months earlier. She was vivid and uncomplicated in a way that Nathan found easy. And the ease of it had made him careless in ways he had not fully examined. They met at the Meridian, a boutique hotel on the Upper East Side, in a room Nathan reserved through a consultancy account registered to a subsidiary of his firm. The billing was clean. The paper trail was, he believed, invisible. Brooke had placed a small succulent on the windowsill of the room several months ago, and Nathan had not thought about what that gesture meant beyond the moment he noticed it. He had not thought about what any of this meant beyond the moment, because he had spent 14 months constructing a version of his life in which consequence had no logical place. That Tuesday evening, he sat across from Brooke at a restaurant near the hotel and listened to her talk about a difficult client and thought to himself that this was simple and comfortable and entirely without complication. He ordered wine. He raised his glass. He smiled across the table. And he felt nothing approaching guilt, because guilt requires the acknowledgement that someone else is being harmed, and Nathan had become extraordinarily skilled at not acknowledging things he did not wish to see. What he could not see, because he had never thought to look, was what Celeste had been doing with her evenings while he was at the Meridian. And what Celeste had been doing was building a case that would dismantle his entire world. 6 months before the envelope arrived on Nathan's desk, Celeste Whitmore Calloway was sitting at the kitchen island of their Westport home, reviewing household accounts with a habit she had never fully dropped from her years as a forensic accountant. It was a Tuesday evening. Nathan was at what he called a client dinner. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old wood settling in the autumn cold. She had not been looking for anything. That was the part she would remember later with a clarity that felt almost cruel. How ordinary the moment was before it stopped being ordinary forever. She was reconciling credit card statements against the household budget. A monthly routine Nathan called adorable in a tone that made the word feel like a small cage. She had always done this. Numbers made sense to her in a way that language sometimes did not. Numbers did not perform. Numbers did not tell you what they thought you wanted to hear. Numbers simply were what they were, and if you knew how to read them, they told you everything. The charge appeared on the third page of the statement. The Meridian Hotel, $420. She scanned backward. The same charge appeared the previous Tuesday, and the Thursday before that, and the Tuesday before that. She went back 8 months. The pattern was flawless. Every Tuesday, every Thursday, $420 each time, 32 consecutive charges. Nathan had told her those evenings were client dinners and contractor meetings. He had told her the firm was in a growth phase that required extensive relationship management. He had told her these things casually, the way you mention weather or traffic, embedding deception in the ordinary rhythms of domestic conversation, so that questioning it would feel like questioning whether it was raining. Celeste sat with that information for a long time without moving. Her hands were very still on the page. The baby shifted inside her, a slow roll that she felt against her ribs. She placed one hand on her belly and held it there. And something happened in that moment that she would not fully understand until much later. She made a choice. Not the choice to confront or to cry or to call her sister in a panic. She made the choice to be exactly who she had been before Nathan Calloway ever walked into her life and gently, persistently convinced her to become someone smaller. She had spent 9 years tracing hidden assets and financial deception for a regional accounting firm before Nathan had encouraged her to leave her career and focus on their home and their future together. He had framed it as an investment in their partnership. She had agreed because she loved him and because she trusted his vision for their life. What she understood now, sitting at the kitchen island with 32 hotel charges glowing on the screen in front of her, was that she had confused love with the willingness to disappear. She stood up. She walked to the bathroom. She locked the door. She sat on the cold tile floor and cried so hard she could not breathe. The baby kicked. A strong, definitive kick, right against her palm. "I know," Celeste whispered to her belly. "I know. Give me a minute." She gave herself exactly 4 minutes. She timed it. 4 minutes to fall apart. Then she washed her face, looked at her reflection in the mirror, and watched something shift behind her own eyes that she recognized from years of professional work. It was the look she used to get when she opened a new case file and realized the numbers were going to tell her a story that someone had paid a great deal of money to keep hidden. She called her sister. Rosalind Whitmore, known to everyone who mattered as Roz, answered on the third ring. She was mid-shift at Stanford Hospital, where she worked as an ER nurse, and her voice carried the particular blend of alertness and exhaustion that 12-hour shifts produced. Celeste said 4 words. "He is cheating on me." The silence on the other end lasted exactly 3 seconds, which was the longest Roz had been quiet about anything in her entire adult life. "I am coming over," Roz said. "Do not touch the knives. That is a joke. Mostly." Roz arrived 40 minutes later with grocery bags. Celeste, who had spent the intervening time sitting at the kitchen island without moving, stacking and restacking the evidence in her mind the way she used to organize case files, looked up when her sister walked through the door. "What did you bring?" Celeste asked. "Ice cream," Roz said. setting the bags on the counter, wine that you cannot drink because you are pregnant, and a legal pad. We are going to eat our feelings, and then we are going to plan. Celeste almost smiled, almost, not quite, but the muscles in her face moved in that direction, and it was enough. They sat at the kitchen island until midnight. Roz listened without interrupting, which was the most difficult and most generous thing she knew how to do. Celeste laid out the charges, the pattern, the 14 months of Tuesday and Thursday absences. She spoke in the clipped, organized cadence of a professional presenting findings, because that was the only voice she could trust not to break. When she finished, Roz set down her spoon and looked at her sister with an expression that was equal parts fury and tenderness. "Here is what we are not going to do," Roz said. "We are not going to confront him tonight. We are not going to confront him tomorrow. We are not going to give that man a single second of warning before you are ready to bring the whole thing down on his head. You were the best forensic accountant in this state before he convinced you to quit. So, you are going to do what you do best. You are going to follow the money. You are going to build a case so tight that his own lawyer will tell him to settle. And when you serve him those papers, it is going to be the last surprise of his comfortable little life." Celeste looked at her sister for a long moment. Then she pulled the legal pad toward her and picked up a pen. Over the following weeks, Celeste documented everything with the systematic precision that had once made her the highest performing analyst at her firm. Every charge, every gap in Nathan's calendar, every inconsistency in the stories he told her about his evenings. She cross-referenced hotel records against Nathan's claimed locations with the same attention she had once given to corporate fraud cases. She hired a private investigator named Doug, a retired police detective who charged $200 an hour and communicated exclusively through encrypted email. Doug produced photographs within two weeks. Nathan and a woman entering the Meridian. The same woman leaving with him the following morning. His hand on the small of her back at a restaurant 3 blocks from the hotel. And one photograph that made Celeste set down her tea and stare at the screen until the image blurred. The woman was wearing a sapphire pendant necklace. Celeste recognized it immediately. Nathan had bought it 4 months ago and told Celeste the jeweler had made it wrong, that he had returned it for a refund. She had believed him because she had still been in the business of believing him then. She opened her notebook and wrote one word beneath the columns of dates and charges. The word was enough. Celeste found Sandra Mercer through a referral from a former colleague who had gone through a difficult divorce 3 years earlier. The colleague had said simply that Sandra was the kind of attorney who made opposing counsel lose sleep, and that she was worth every penny of her considerable fees. Sandra's office was on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Stamford, decorated with the understated confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. She was 55, silver-haired, and possessed a courtroom demeanor that combined surgical precision with a dry wit that had made more than one judge suppress a smile during proceedings. At their first meeting, Celeste placed 3 labeled folders on Sandra's desk. The first contained 14 months of hotel charges, cross-referenced with Nathan's calendar claims. The second contained the private investigator's photographs with timestamps and location data. The third contained a financial analysis of Nathan's business holdings, personal accounts, and the subsidiary consultancy account he used to pay for the Meridian. Sandra read through each folder without speaking. It took her 22 minutes. When she set the final page down, she looked up at Celeste with an expression that was professional and calm and faintly impressed. "Mrs. Calloway," she said, "I have been doing this for 22 years. Most clients come to me with suspicion. You have come to me with a prosecution. Celeste said, only that preparation had always been her strongest professional habit. Sandra identified the critical weakness in the prenuptial agreement Nathan had proposed before their wedding. The document was thorough in protecting his firm and primary assets, drafted by an expensive attorney who had clearly understood Nathan's priorities. But it contained no provision whatsoever for a child. At the time of signing, children had been a vague future possibility that Nathan's lawyer had not thought to address with specificity. Connecticut family law made that oversight enormously significant. Nathan's documented wealth, all of it, would be calculated directly against his legal responsibility as a father. No private agreement between spouses could remove that obligation. The prenuptial agreement that Nathan believed was his fortress had a hole in its wall large enough to drive a settlement through. Here is something nobody tells you, Celeste thought as she drove home from that first meeting, her hands steady on the wheel, and her mind already 3 steps ahead. When someone asks you to shrink so they can grow, they are not building a partnership. They are building an audience. And audiences would eventually stand up and leave. Over the following 8 weeks, Celeste constructed her exit with the same meticulous attention she had once applied to training offshore accounts. She opened a personal bank account at a different institution and began moving careful, unremarkable amounts into it every second week. Amounts small enough not to trigger any alerts. Amounts large enough that, accumulated over time, they would provide a bridge between her old life and whatever came next. She reconnected quietly with former colleagues in the accounting world. 3 of them responded with immediate enthusiasm, telling her that her reputation in the field had not dimmed despite her years away from practice. 2 firms in the city expressed interest in meeting with her after the baby arrived. She found an apartment near the Saugatuck River, a bright, clean space on the 3rd floor with a bedroom for her daughter and a second room with large east-facing windows that caught the morning light. She signed the lease using her maiden name and paid the deposit from her new account. She began moving her most important belongings there gradually, on mornings when Nathan was at his office. Her professional certificates, her research notebooks from her accounting years, the photographs from her career that Nathan had always kept behind the living room bookcase, rather than on the wall where she might have put them herself. Each trip felt like recovering a piece of herself that she had agreed to store away in exchange for a life that had turned out to be a carefully decorated lie. The divorce petition was drafted by the end of November. Sandra reviewed it 3 times, tightening language, strengthening positions, ensuring every claim was supported by documentation that would withstand aggressive cross-examination. The petition requested dissolution of marriage on grounds of documented marital deception, full financial disclosure across all registered entities, primary custody of the unborn child, child support calculated against Nathan's comprehensive, documented income. Celeste scheduled the delivery for a Thursday morning at 11. She chose Thursday because Nathan held his weekly investor briefing from 10 to 11, which meant the envelope would arrive while he was in the meeting and would be waiting on his desk when he returned. She chose 11 because she wanted him to open it alone, in the quiet of his office, with no audience to perform for. She also placed a handwritten letter inside the envelope alongside the legal documents. She had written it 3 weeks earlier at the kitchen table, with her hands resting on her belly and the quiet of the house around her. The letter was not written in anger, and it did not plead for anything. It said simply that she had given this marriage everything she had, that she had watched that investment become something unrecognizable, that she was choosing her daughter over a life built on careful pretending. The final line said that the thing she found saddest was not what he had done, but that he had never understood the value of what he already held. She sealed the envelope and gave it to Sandra's office for the courier service. And then she waited. But waiting, for Celeste, was not passive. She reviewed her financial projections. She confirmed her apartment was furnished and ready. She organized Nora's things, the ones she would take, into labeled boxes stored at Roz's house. She prepared the way she had always prepared, with orderly columns and contingency plans and the quiet understanding that hope was not a strategy. On Tuesday evening, 2 days before the delivery date, she lay in bed and listened to Nathan's car pull into the driveway at 9:17. She listened to him come inside, pour himself a glass of water, and climb the stairs. He slipped into bed beside her and kissed her shoulder. "How was dinner?" she asked, her voice perfectly neutral. "Long," he said. "The Henderson Project is getting complicated." There was no Henderson Project dinner. There was only Brooke and the Meridian, and a hotel room with a succulent on the windowsill. Celeste knew this because her private investigator had confirmed Nathan's location 90 minutes earlier, but she said only that she hoped it went well, and Nathan murmured agreement, and within 10 minutes he was asleep. Celeste lay in the dark and placed both hands on her belly and said nothing. 2 more days. The thing about carefully laid plans is that they assume the world will cooperate with their timing. Celeste had learned this principle during her years in forensic accounting, where every investigation contained at least one moment when the evidence shifted unexpectedly and the entire strategy had to be rebuilt on the fly. She understood this intellectually. Understanding it emotionally was something else entirely. On Wednesday evening, the night before the divorce papers were scheduled for delivery, Celeste was sitting in the nursery folding baby clothes when her phone buzzed, Nathan's name on the screen. "Hey," his voice said when she answered. His tone was strange, too warm, too deliberate, like a man performing casual. "I know things have been busy. I canceled my meetings tomorrow morning. I thought we could spend the day together. Maybe look at some things for the nursery." Celeste's hands went still on the onesie she was folding. Her heart rate, which had been calm and steady for months, spiked so hard she could feel it in her throat. "That sounds nice," she said, and her voice did not betray her. 9 years of living with a man who lied for a living had taught her, among other things, how to keep her own voice level when the ground was moving beneath her feet. She ended the call and immediately opened the cloud account linked to her old college email, the one Nathan did not know existed. She pulled up her financial records. Everything looked normal. Then she checked the joint account statement and saw it. One charge dated 3 days earlier to Douglas Wright Investigative Services. $200. She had paid Doug from the joint account exactly once, a mistake she had made during a week when her personal account was between transfers, and she needed the invoice cleared before a deadline. She had intended to reclassify it later. She had not reclassified it, and Nathan, or someone with access to Nathan's accounts, had seen it. He did not know what she knew, but he knew she had hired a private investigator, and a man who was keeping a secret would understand immediately what that meant. Celeste called Sandra. It was 9:14 in the evening. Sandra answered on the 4th ring, her voice carrying the particular alertness of an attorney who had spent 2 decades being called with bad news at inconvenient hours. Celeste explained the situation in 3 sentences. Sandra was quiet for a moment. "If he moves assets tonight," Sandra said, "our entire financial strategy changes. We need to accelerate." The courier service was closed. Electronic filing could not happen until the court opened at 9 the following morning. Celeste was trapped in a house with a man who might be one search engine query away from discovering everything she had built. Sandra said she would have the papers ready for emergency filing first thing. She told Celeste to stay calm, to maintain her routine, to give Nathan absolutely no indication that anything had changed. She said these things in the firm, measured voice of a woman who had guided clients through worse. Celeste hung up and sat in the nursery for 3 minutes, breathing. Then she texted Roz, "I think he knows something." Roz responded in 40 seconds. Scale of 1 to 10, 7, Celeste typed. "Then you do not sleep tonight. And tomorrow you move like your life depends on it, because it does." Nathan came home at 9:40. He was cheerful in a way that felt like a costume. He brought Chinese takeout, which he never did on Wednesdays, and he set the containers on the kitchen island and talked about a project deadline while Celeste ate shrimp lo mein and monitored his face for any indication of what he actually knew. He gave nothing away, which meant either he did not know or he was as good at performing normal as she was. Neither option was comforting. They went to bed at 11. Nathan fell asleep within 15 minutes. Celeste lay beside him in the dark, wide awake, her mind running calculations the way it used to during all-night audit sessions. Every few minutes, the baby moved, small shifting adjustments that felt like a reminder that whatever happened next, there was someone depending on the outcome. At 5:30 in the morning, Nathan got up to use the bathroom. The moment the door closed, Celeste reached for his phone on the nightstand. It was unlocked. She had 14 seconds, maybe 20, before the toilet flushed and the door opened. She opened his messages and scrolled until she found a name that made her stomach drop. Henry Calloway. Nathan's older brother, owner of the firm. The most recent message, sent at 11:47 the previous night, read, "We need to talk about the accounts. Something is off. Call me before you do anything." Celeste closed the phone, placed it exactly where it had been, and rolled onto her side. With her eyes closed 3 seconds before the bathroom door opened, Nathan climbed back into bed. His breathing evened out within minutes. Celeste lay in the dark and understood that her situation had just become significantly more complicated. Henry was not just Nathan's brother and business partner. He was a man with full access to the firm's financial records, which meant he had seen the same consultancy account charges that Celeste had traced to the Meridian. But Henry's concern in that message was not about Nathan's affair. His concern was about the accounts, which meant Henry had noticed something else, something financial. And the most likely thing he had noticed was the money Celeste had been moving. She had planned for Nathan as an adversary. She had not planned for Henry. She had one enemy with a secret. Now she had two. Sandra filed the divorce petition electronically at 9:03 on Thursday morning. By 9:20, a courier was en route to the Calloway house in Westport because Nathan had canceled his office meetings and was home. Celeste was in the kitchen when she heard the doorbell at 10:15. She knew what it was. She had arranged for it, even if the delivery location and timing had shifted from the original plan. She set down her coffee cup and waited. Nathan answered the door. She heard the brief exchange with the courier, a signature requested, a thank you, the door closing. Then footsteps back through the foyer. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding the cream-colored envelope. His expression was curious, nothing more. He had not yet looked at the return address. "Something from a law office," he said. "Did you order something?" Celeste did not answer. She stood with her back against the kitchen counter and her hands at her sides and watched him turn the envelope over and read the return address. Sandra Mercer, Family Law Associates. She watched his face change. It happened in stages, like weather moving across a landscape. Curiosity, confusion, recognition. And then something cold and still that was more frightening than anger because it was the face of a man deciding how to perform his next emotion rather than actually feeling one. He opened the envelope right there in the kitchen. He read the first page, standing up. By the second page, he had moved to the island and was leaning against it, with both hands flat on the granite. By the third page, he had found the photographs. He held one up. Nathan and Brooke entering the Meridian. Timestamp in the lower corner. You had me followed, he said. His voice was level and controlled. You gave me a reason to, Celeste said. He set the photograph down and continued reading. The financial analysis, the cross-referenced hotel charges against his claimed locations. The 14 months of documented deception laid out with the precision of a forensic case file, because that is exactly what it was. When he finished, he looked at her across the kitchen island. The island where she had discovered the charges 6 months earlier. The island where she had sat with Roz and built her plan. The island that had been the silent witness to the entire dismantling of their marriage from both sides. You think you can take my life apart, he said. His voice was quiet, which was worse than shouting. I built this life. Every room you are standing in, every piece of furniture you are touching. You were nothing when I found you. Celeste felt those words land in her chest like stones, not because she believed them, but because she recognized them. She recognized the particular cruelty of a man who reduces his wife's entire identity to the things he provided, as though a woman is simply the space between the possessions her husband selected for her. I was a forensic accountant who was on track to make partner, she said. Her voice was shaking, but she did not stop. You turned me into a decoration, and then you got bored with the decor. Nathan stared at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his keys from the counter, walked to the front door, and slammed it so hard that a picture fell off the hallway wall. Their wedding photograph. The glass cracked across both their faces. Celeste stood in the kitchen and listened to his car start and pull away. Then she picked up her phone and called Roz. He got the papers, she said. How did it go? Roz asked. He said I was nothing when he found me. Roz was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Did he actually say that? That is a real thing men say. I thought that was just in movies. Incredible. The audacity is almost artistic. Celeste almost laughed. Almost. The muscles moved in that direction, and it was enough. Here is something worth knowing about the moment when a controlled man loses control. He does not become smaller. He becomes more dangerous. Because a man who has spent his entire adult life curating his image will fight harder to protect that image than he ever fought to protect the people inside it. Nathan drove to his office and called his brother Henry from the parking garage. Within the hour, they had contacted Gerald Ashford, the most aggressive family law attorney in Fairfield County. By that evening, the counterattack was in motion. The first blow came on a Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week after Nathan received the divorce papers. Celeste was at the pharmacy, picking up prenatal vitamins. She handed her credit card to the pharmacist, a kind-faced woman she had been seeing monthly throughout her pregnancy. The card was declined. Celeste tried a second card, declined. She stood at the counter, 8 months pregnant, and felt the particular humiliation of financial helplessness in a public space. The pharmacist's sympathetic expression, the woman behind her in line pretending to look at her phone. She paid with $14 in cash from her purse and walked to her car and sat in the parking lot for 3 minutes before she trusted herself to drive. Nathan had frozen the joint accounts, all of them. Her personal accounts still had the money she had moved, but the joint accounts, which held the operating funds for the household, the prenatal care costs, the insurance payments, were locked. Sandra filed an emergency motion that afternoon, but the damage was not only financial, it was psychological. It was designed to make Celeste feel exposed and vulnerable at the exact moment when she needed to feel strong. The second blow arrived 4 days later, in the form of a legal filing from Gerald Ashford. The motion was titled, Emergency request for psychological evaluation of petitioner. Celeste read it at Sandra's office, sitting in the leather chair across from her attorney's desk, and felt the words rearrange themselves into something she recognized with the particular horror of a woman watching her own competence being weaponized against her. Gerald's filing characterized Celeste's investigation as evidence of obsessive and paranoid behavior. Her systematic documentation was described as compulsive surveillance. Her methodical financial preparation was framed as secretive asset manipulation indicative of emotional instability. The filing requested that the court mandate a full psychological evaluation before any custody determination could proceed, arguing that the mother's erratic behavior pattern raised concerns about her capacity for sound parental judgment. Nathan had taken the 6 months of meticulous work that represented Celeste's greatest professional strengths and rewritten them as symptoms of a disordered mind. It was, she realized, the most sophisticated lie he had ever told. Because it used the truth, every fact was technically accurate and simply changed the story those facts were telling. Sandra read the filing with the controlled fury of an attorney who had seen this tactic before and despised it every single time. "This is what they do," Sandra said. "They punch back hard and fast and hope you crumble. Are you going to crumble?" "I do not know," Celeste said. Her voice broke on the last word. "Wrong answer," Sandra said. "Try again." A long silence. "No," Celeste said. "Good. Now let me tell you what Gerald Ashford does not understand about you." The third blow was the one Celeste had not seen coming. Henry Calloway called her directly on a Tuesday evening. His voice was warm and concerned and entirely false. "Celeste," he said, "I hope you know I have always considered you family. This situation between you and Nathan is painful for everyone. I want you to know that I am trying to be fair to both sides." Then his voice shifted, just slightly, just enough. "But I should tell you," he continued, "that if this divorce becomes contentious, I may be asked to provide testimony about certain things I observed during firm events over the years, the holiday parties, the client dinners. I would hate for anyone to mischaracterize things I witnessed, but you understand, as a partner in the firm, my obligation is to accuracy." He paused. Then he said, very carefully, that he recalled several occasions when Celeste had seemed unusually emotional at firm events, drinking more than seemed comfortable, making comments that struck him as erratic. He said he was sure these impressions were just that, impressions. But in a courtroom, impressions could become testimony. It was all lies, every word. Celeste had attended Nathan's firm. Events, sober, composed, and polite to the point of invisibility, because that was the version of herself Nathan had preferred her to perform. But Henry's word carried institutional weight, and he delivered his threat with the smooth sincerity of a man who had practiced deceit alongside his brother for decades. Celeste hung up and sat in her apartment near the river. The evening light came through the east-facing windows and moved across the floor in long, warm bands that would later become the light her daughter crawled through. But in that moment, the apartment felt very small and very quiet. She had no access to her joint accounts. She was facing a court-ordered psychological evaluation designed to paint her as unstable, and a key witness was prepared to lie about her character under oath. She was, for the first time since she had begun this process, genuinely afraid. She called Sandra. When the attorney answered, Celeste said, "I do not know if I can do this." Sandra was quiet for 3 seconds. Then she said, "Tell me exactly what Henry said." Word for word. Celeste told her. Sandra said, "Celeste, listen to me carefully. Henry Calloway just made the biggest mistake of his life. Do you know why?" Celeste shook her head, though Sandra could not see it. Because threatening a witness is a crime, and you are going to document every word of that conversation, and I am going to make sure a judge sees it at exactly the right moment. Henry Calloway thinks he is protecting his brother. What he has actually done is hand us leverage we did not have 20 minutes ago. The hearing on Gerald Ashford's psychological evaluation motion was held on a Monday morning in early December. The courtroom was smaller than Celeste had expected, wood-paneled and quietly formal, in a way that made every word spoken in it feel permanent. Gerald presented his case with confident precision. He characterized Celeste as a woman whose behavior over the preceding months demonstrated a pattern of obsessive surveillance, secretive financial manipulation, and emotional volatility that raised legitimate concerns about her parental fitness. He spoke for 12 minutes without raising his voice, and every sentence was designed to transform Celeste's competence into evidence of her instability. Sandra stood when it was her turn. She placed a single folder on the table in front of her. "Your Honor," she said, "my client is a forensic accountant who spent 9 years professionally tracing hidden assets and financial deception for corporate clients. The work, Mr. Ashford characterizes as obsessive surveillance is, in fact, the application of professional investigative skills to a domestic situation that warranted investigation. The documentation he calls compulsive is thorough, dated, and assembled with the methodological rigor of a trained financial analyst. If this is instability, I wish more of my clients were unstable." She opened the folder and presented the evidence. The hotel charges, the calendar cross-references, the photographs with timestamps, the financial trail through the subsidiary consultancy account. Every piece was clean, dated, and independently verifiable. Then Sandra presented one additional document. A signed affidavit from Tobias Grant, Nathan's assistant, confirming that he had been instructed to block Nathan's calendar every Tuesday and Thursday evening for over 14 months, and that he understood these blocks were not for client meetings. Gerald objected. The judge overruled. The judge denied the psychological evaluation. She unfroze the joint accounts with a temporary order. She issued a preliminary custody arrangement favoring Celeste and scheduled the final hearing for January. Celeste walked out of the courthouse into cold December air and allowed herself to breathe for what felt like the first time in weeks. Roz was waiting in the car in the parking lot. "How did it go?" Roz asked. "We won this round," Celeste said. "Good," Roz said, reaching into the back seat. "I brought celebratory donuts, the ones with the sprinkles, because we are adults who earned this." Celeste took a donut and bit into it and felt a small, cautious warmth spread through her chest. "Something Sandra taught me that I want every woman to hear," she thought as she sat in the passenger seat of her sister's car. "In a divorce, they will try to make your competence look like crazy. Your preparation will be called obsession. Your self-protection will be called aggression. Name it for what it is. And do not let anyone rewrite your strengths as weaknesses." For 2 weeks, things stabilized. The accounts were accessible. The apartment was fully furnished. Celeste began reconnecting with professional contacts in earnest. The ground felt, for the first time in months, solid beneath her feet. Then Tobias called. He asked to meet in person. His voice had the particular tension of someone carrying information that was heavier than he wanted to hold alone. They met at a diner in Norwalk, a place with vinyl booths and fluorescent lighting that felt appropriately anonymous. Tobias slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents showing that Nathan had been transferring major assets to a new limited liability company. The LLC was registered in the name of Margaret Calloway, Henry's wife. "They are hiding money," Tobias said. It has been happening for about 3 weeks since the court hearing. Nathan told me to process the transfers and not to log them in the regular system. Celeste looked at the documents. The amounts were significant. $2.8 million moved through 3 separate transactions into an entity that, on paper, had no connection to Nathan Calloway. This was not unexpected. Sandra had warned her that asset concealment was a common tactic, but the execution was sophisticated, designed by someone who understood corporate structures well enough to build layers of distance between the money and its source. Then Tobias said, "There is something else. I do not know how to tell you this." He looked at his coffee cup for a long moment. Then he looked up. "Brooke Kensington is pregnant," he said. 8 weeks, Nathan knows. I overheard him discussing it with Gerald. They are preparing to use it in the custody case. Celeste heard the words. She understood them individually and collectively. She understood their legal implications and their personal ones. She understood that Nathan was not simply fighting the divorce. He was constructing a replacement, a new family, a new version of the life he was losing, built on the same foundation of performance and control. And he intended to use that construction to argue that their daughter would be better served by a 2-parent household that included him and the woman he had been sleeping with for 14 months. She put both hands flat on the table. The diner sounds faded. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A waitress walked past, carrying plates that clinked against each other. Celeste bent forward and pressed her forehead against the cool surface of the table and stayed there for 10 seconds. When she lifted her head, her eyes were red, but her jaw was set. There is a moment in every fight where the thing you feared most actually happens, she thought. And you discover something strange. You are still breathing. The worst thing happened, and you are still here. That is not hope. That is just fact. But sometimes, fact is enough to build on. Celeste went to Sandra's office the next morning. She had been up all night. She looked, by her own admission, terrible. Her eyes were swollen. Her hair was pulled back in a way that suggested function over appearance, and she was wearing the same sweater she had worn the previous day because changing clothes had not made it onto her priority list. Sandra sat across from her and waited with the patience of a woman who had learned that the most important things clients needed to say often required silence before they could emerge. "They are hiding assets," Celeste said. "His mistress is pregnant, and they are going to argue that she provides a more stable family environment for my daughter." Sandra set down her pen. "Is that everything? Is that not enough?" Sandra leaned forward. Her reading glasses caught the office light. "Celeste," she said, "you spent 9 years tracing hidden money for a living. He is hiding money. This is not a disaster. This is your entire professional skill set, gift-wrapped and handed to you by a man too arrogant to remember what his own wife used to do for a living." The words landed in the room like a match, striking. Celeste sat very still. Then something happened behind her eyes that Sandra would later describe to a colleague as the most satisfying thing she had seen in a courtroom career spanning 2 decades. The forensic accountant who had been dormant for years woke up completely. Celeste spent the next 3 weeks working, not the cautious, careful work of a woman protecting herself, the focused, relentless work of a professional doing what she was born to do. She started with the LLC registered to Margaret Calloway. She traced its formation documents, its registered agent, its banking relationships. She followed the money through 3 shell entities, each one layered to create distance from Nathan's name. She mapped transaction flows, identified timing patterns, and built a financial reconstruction that showed, with mathematical certainty, that $2.8 million in marital assets had been concealed. She also discovered something Nathan had not anticipated. He had used firm resources, specifically billable hours from an associate attorney on the Callaway and Associates payroll to set up the shell structure. This meant firm money had been used for personal asset concealment, which was not simply a divorce tactic. It was a potential tax fraud issue that put the entire firm at risk. She brought everything to Sandra in a folder that was 3 inches thick and organized with color-coded tabs. Sandra reviewed it in her office over 2 hours. When she finished, she removed her reading glasses and set them on the desk and looked at Celeste. "I'm going to file an amended petition tomorrow," Sandra said. "It will include fraud allegations." Gerald Ashford is going to lose his mind. Gerald Ashford called Sandra the following Monday in what Sandra later described as a state of controlled professional panic. Sandra's response was delivered with the calm of a woman who had been practicing law since before Gerald had passed the bar. "Your client hid assets from a forensic accountant," Sandra said. "My 8-year-old nephew could have told him that was a bad idea, and my nephew is not particularly bright." The fraud allegations changed everything. The LLC was in Henry's wife's name, which meant Henry was now directly implicated in the asset concealment. When Nathan realized that Henry's involvement was exposed and that Henry's own liability was now on the table, the dynamic between the brothers shifted with the speed and violence of a fault line giving way. Henry, faced with the choice between protecting his brother and protecting himself, chose himself. He engaged his own attorney, who contacted Sandra's office within 48 hours to negotiate cooperation. Henry provided a sworn statement confirming that Nathan had directed the asset transfers and that Henry had facilitated them under pressure. Roz called Celeste that evening. "So his own brother sold him out," Roz said. "Thanksgiving is going to be incredible. Can I come? I will bring a casserole and a court reporter." Celeste laughed. A real laugh. The first real laugh in months. It felt unfamiliar and necessary, like stretching a muscle that had been held tight for too long. Celeste went into labor on a Saturday morning in January, 31 days after the first hearing. She was in her apartment near the river, sorting through a box of items she had brought from storage. When the first contraction arrived with the unmistakable certainty of something that had been organizing itself for months and was now ready, she breathed through it. She checked the time on her phone. She called Roz. Roz arrived in 12 minutes. She had kept her schedule clear for 2 weeks and her phone charged at all times because she had understood from the moment Celeste told her what she had decided that this birth was going to be one of the most important days either of them would experience. In the car, between contractions, Celeste said, "If Nathan shows up before this baby is out, I swear to—" Roz held up one hand. "He will not. I told the nurses station he needs to check in with security first. I may have implied there is a restraining order. There is not. But they do not know that," Roz, Celeste said, half laughing, half groaning. "What? It is a gray area." Labor lasted 9 hours. Roz stayed for every one of them. She held Celeste's hand and did not offer advice and did not speak more than necessary and understood that sometimes presence is the only form of support that actually reaches a person in the moments that matter most. There were moments during those 9 hours when the pain was so total that Celeste lost track of everything except the breath she was in. And in those moments, she thought about nothing. Not Nathan, not the divorce, not the hidden money, or the legal filings, or the woman carrying another man's child in a hotel room across town. Just the breath, just the next second, just the work of bringing her daughter into the world, Nora Whitmore. Callaway was born at 10:08 in the evening. She weighed 7 pounds and 4 ounces. She had dark eyes and a calm, watchful expression that seemed older than ours, as though she had arrived already understanding that the world was a complicated place, and she intended to observe it carefully before forming opinions. Celeste held her daughter against her chest and wept. Not from grief, not from exhaustion, although she was exhausted in every cell of her body. She wept from the overwhelming and wordless reality of something honest arriving in a life that had felt dishonest for a very long time. She named her Nora, after their grandmother, who had told her and Roz when they were girls that a woman who knows her own worth will never have to convince someone else of it. Celeste had carried that sentence for 24 years, and now she had a daughter to pass it to. Roz held the baby while Celeste slept. When Celeste woke 4 hours later, Roz was still in the chair beside the bed, Nora asleep in her arms, her face soft with the tenderness she usually kept behind several layers of sarcasm. "She has your nose," Roz said quietly. "Poor kid," Celeste said. "Your nose is fine," Roz said. "It is the rest of your taste and men we need to work on." Nathan received notification through Gerald's office that evening. A daughter, healthy, mother and baby, both well. Visitation available the following afternoon between 2 and 4. He arrived at the hospital at 1:58. He had chosen a gift himself rather than delegating. A small stuffed rabbit with soft gray fur that he had picked from a shelf of identical options and held in his hands in the store for several minutes, trying to select the right one, not understanding that they were all the same and that the choosing was the only part that mattered. The nurse showed him to Celeste's room. He knocked twice before opening the door. Celeste was sitting up in the bed, tired and luminous at once, holding a small, bundled person who had her mother's dark eyes and a calm expression that made Nathan feel, for the first time in his adult life, that he was in the presence of someone who could see right through him and had decided to reserve judgment for now. Celeste told him Nora's name. She told him that visiting arrangements would be managed through their attorneys for the foreseeable future. She told him she expected him to show up consistently for his daughter, regardless of everything that had happened between them, and that consistency was the only thing she intended to measure him against going forward. Her voice carried no sharpness and no forgiveness, only clarity, which was harder to sit with than either of those things would have been. She offered to let him hold Nora. He accepted with both hands trembling. The baby was warm and impossibly small and real in a way that reorganized something essential inside his chest. He held her for 3 minutes and then returned her carefully to Celeste's arms and said the only thing that felt truthful. "I am sorry," he said, plainly, without explanation or request attached to it. Celeste looked at him for a moment before she responded. "I know," she said. "Sorry is a beginning, not a resolution." Then she looked down at Nora, and Nathan understood from the quiet completeness of that gesture that the conversation had arrived at its natural end. The final divorce hearing was held on a Wednesday morning in March, 7 weeks after Nora was born. The courtroom was the same wood-paneled room where the psychological evaluation motion had been denied 3 months earlier. Sandra Mercer sat beside Celeste at the petitioner's table, with the calm focus of a surgeon entering an operation she had prepared for comprehensively. Gerald Ashford presented Nathan's position. He spoke about Nathan's therapeutic progress, his consistent visitation record, his genuine commitment to co-parenting. He requested equal custody and argued that Nathan's recent behavior demonstrated meaningful personal growth. Sandra stood. "Your Honor," she said, "Mr. Calloway asks this court to believe he is a changed man. I would like to believe that is possible. But 3 weeks ago, his client was still concealing assets in a limited liability company registered to his sister-in-law. Changed men do not hide money. Changed men do not weaponize custody proceedings. Changed men do not send family members to threaten witnesses. Changed men show up differently. And so far, all Mr. Calloway has changed is his strategy. She presented the complete amended case, the affair evidence, the 14 months of hotel charges and photographs, the subsidiary account used to fund the deception, the hidden assets traced through 3 shell entities, Henry Calloway's sworn statement confirming his brother directed the concealment, the recordings of Henry's threatening phone call to Celeste. Gerald objected twice. The judge overruled both times. The judge ruled decisively. Primary custody to Celeste. Substantial child support calculated against Nathan's full documented wealth, including the previously concealed assets. A property settlement generating independent income. Regular visitation for Nathan, contingent on continued consistency. And a formal note in the court record regarding the attempted asset concealment and witness intimidation. Nathan sat in the courtroom and, for the first time in the proceedings, did not perform. His face was simply the face of a man who had lost something he could not get back, and who was beginning to understand, slowly and painfully, that the loss had not started with the envelope on his desk. It had started years earlier, on the day he looked at a brilliant woman and decided she would be more useful to him as an audience than as a partner. Celeste walked out of the courthouse and did not look back. Nathan did not contest the settlement. The aftermath arrived not as a single moment, but as a series of quiet reckonings that unfolded over the following months. Brooke Kensington, after learning the full scope of Nathan's deception and the legal consequences he now faced, ended their relationship. She told him, in a conversation that lasted less than 5 minutes, that he had not wanted her. He had wanted someone who made him feel like he had not lost anything. That is not love, she said. That is furniture. Henry left the partnership. The brothers did not speak for a long time afterward. The firm survived, but diminished. Nathan's name remained on the building, but the name felt different to him now. It felt like a monument to a version of himself that had been constructed entirely from ambition and performance, and had contained, at its center, nothing that could sustain weight. He began therapy, not as a redemption arc, because redemption implies a destination, and Nathan was nowhere near a destination. He was simply a man sitting in a room with a therapist named Bernard, who had no tolerance for performance and considerable patience for honest effort. Bernard asked him, in their first session, what he had believed success was supposed to feel like. Nathan sat with the question for a long time. He did not have an answer, but he sat with it, and that was something. He never missed a scheduled visit with Nora. He arrived on time. He engaged with his daughter with genuine and full attention. He respected every boundary Celeste had established, without negotiating against them. He did not use Nora as a reason to reopen conversations with her mother. He showed up consistently and without drama, because consistency was the only honest thing he had left to offer. Celeste returned to professional work with a momentum that surprised people who had known her only in the context of Nathan's life. She joined a mid-sized accounting firm that specialized in sustainability finance. The skills she had built over 9 years had not diminished during her time away. They had, if anything, been sharpened by the experience of applying them to her own life. Within 5 months, she was leading her own client portfolio. Within 9 months, she had been invited into a senior advisory role. She accepted with the quiet confidence of a woman who had stopped apologizing for her own competence. She raised Nora in the apartment near the river. The morning light came through the east-facing windows every day and moved across the floor in long, warm bands that Nora, once she was old enough to crawl, would follow with extraordinary concentration, as though tracking something essential that only she could see. Celeste began writing in the evenings after Nora was asleep. Long-form pieces about financial literacy, professional re-entry, and the particular challenges women face when rebuilding lives that had been structured around someone else's priorities. A small online publication began running her essays monthly. The work found readers, the readers sent messages. Celeste answered some of them and understood that her experience had become something useful beyond herself. Roz came for dinner every Sunday. They ate and talked about ordinary things, the week, the neighborhood, what Nora had learned, what was growing in the window box above the kitchen sink. Celeste understood that this regular and unremarkable presence was among the most valuable things in her life. Not because it was dramatic or transformative, but precisely because it was not. It was steady and simple and real, and after years of living inside a performance, real was the most extraordinary thing she could imagine. On a Thursday afternoon, 3 years after the divorce was finalized, Nathan arrived at the school gate to pick up Nora for their regular visit. Celeste was standing near the gate when he pulled up. Nora spotted him first and ran toward him with the immediate, uncomplicated joy of a child who does not know yet that love can be conditional, already talking about something she had made in class and wanted to show him. Nathan started to follow her, and Celeste said his name. Quietly, he turned. She looked at him with an expression that held neither warmth nor coldness, only the clear and settled presence of a woman who had built something entirely from her own choices and had no need to explain or justify or perform for anyone. Nora talks about your time together with real happiness, she said. I thought you should know that. Then she turned and walked to her car. Nathan stood at the school gate and watched her go. It was the most honest and complete thing anyone had said to him in years. It had cost her nothing to say, and it meant everything to hear. And the distance between those two facts contained the entire story of what he had lost and what she had built. People ask me when I knew I would be okay, Celeste wrote in an essay that would be published the following month. And the honest answer is that I did not. There was no magical moment where I felt strong. There were just moments where I did the next right thing, even though I was terrified. And eventually the terror got quieter, and the right things got easier. That is not a fairy tale. That is just what rebuilding looks like. Some lives do not return to what they were after they have broken. They become something different, something more considered, something built on ground that has been tested and shown what it can hold. Celeste had her daughter, her work, her sister's Sunday dinners, the morning light moving across the floor of a home that was entirely and completely hers. That was not settling. That was everything. Disclaimer: this content was fully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with real-life lessons. Every character is fictional, but the emotions are universal. We create these stories not just to entertain, but to remind you that strength is not about never falling. It is about what you build after you stand back up. Thank you for supporting original storytelling. We will see you in the next one.